Hey everybody, welcome to Transport Treehouse. My name is Russell Frost and I am the pilot of this little ship. But let me introduce my captain, the lovely and talented Chelsea Sexton. I have to say something every time to make you shake your head.
Yeah, well, I blush easily and you capitalize on that. But yes, I think we've decided that the treehouse is in a pirate ship shape. And this week, we are super excited to have Michael Dunne joining us, who actually is the first one game enough to reach out to us and say, can I come into the treehouse? That we haven't known for a dozen years, which also means that you might get a word in edgewise this time, Russell. But while I will make him explain his own credentials of how he got here, one of the reasons we wanted to have him on is because he is by far the most respected one in our space on all things related to the Chinese automotive market. And every time, he's on all the panels and every conference his name comes up. And every time I talk to someone, they're like, oh my God, you got to talk to Michael. So we're talking to Michael at ZoZoGo. Well, I will ask you to explain the name for one thing,
Yes.
and also the background of how you became this person.
All right, terrific. Thank you so much, first off, for having me today. Really looking forward to our conversation. Where to begin? I think begin at the beginning. I'm a native of Detroit, grew up around cars. My dad was an automotive editor at Popular Mechanics and Popular Science. And what did that mean for me? We got to test new cars. New car was in the driveway every week. He was also a renowned spy photographer. So one of my jobs was to be his wingman. I'd be the driver while he's shooting future product out in Milford, Michigan, or near the Ford Proving Ground. So stewed early on, very close with the auto industry. But when I went to school at Michigan. Times were changing. All my colleagues were saying, I'm going to get a job at the big three. That's what you did.
Right.
And so I talked to my dad. I go, well, what do you think, Ford or GM or Chrysler? And he said, no, none of the above. Go somewhere and do something. So that's what I did right out of school. 1990, went to China with the ambition of sort of being a vanguard of action in this new market that was all about bicycles at the time. And
right.
So shortly after landing there, I quickly realized, I think the timing might not be ideal. The country was poor. Average incomes were like $100, $200 a month. No one had cars except for the government officials. But that was back then, 1990. Let me just fast forward. So I stuck with it. I formed a company called Automotive Resources Asia. And sure enough, we started to see GM and Ford and Chrysler step in and say, hey, this place does have some potential, but we don't understand it at all. The language is different. The rules are different. What they eat, so everything's different here. Hey, there's a guy from Detroit who seems to speak our language, Detroit.
Right.
And so things started to, some traction, and then things started to move, and the rest of the story, that the market just took off, and we continued to assist automakers and suppliers to enter and compete in China and other markets in Asia. So that's sort of the beginning, which is kind of interesting to know, like, where did things start? Yeah. And then about 5 years ago, I stayed in Asia with family, built and sold 2 companies. And then in 2015, I looked around and I said, what's the next big revolution happening in our lifetime? If China was the first one, what's on the horizon? And electrics, Tesla. I remember being at a conference in 2015, autonomous technology. What? This could be the next big thing. So with that in mind, family and I moved to Southern California, where we are today, and began to work with the tech companies up and down the western coast of the United States,
Right.
to find ways to help them enter and compete in key Asian markets, including China, Japan, India, Southeast Asia.
And all the incumbent auto companies now have a lab in Silicon Valley.
Yes, everybody has, up and down the 101. It's just a small incubation of automotive R&D with scores and scores of companies there. They know their technology, but they're less well acquainted with Asia. And when they step into Asia, it's like, okay, this is a different world.
And vice versa, because one of the things that I have been hearing for years is it does not matter what California does or the US does with respect to cafe standards, or even Europe does, that, you know, don't worry your pretty little head. I tend to get a lot of verbal condescension. China's going to go electric, and therefore they will populate the rest of the world with electrics. And I have not yet seen it that way, because there isn't that much cross-pollination with Chinese product. There's a little bit of, you know, Buick makes cars. Oh heck, Buick exists because China. And so there's a fair amount of Buick sold here that were actually made there, but nobody knows it. And it took 20 years for the Japanese car companies and the Korean car companies to be taken seriously in US and in Europe to a certain degree. So I've not bought into this, like, next year we're going to be flooded with millions of Chinese EVs, and yet that's the prevailing wisdom. I don't know if, how do you see that?
You know what, there's a lot of, I totally agree with you, but what makes us pause is that there's this pretty consistent flow of Chinese companies that continue to show up on the doorstep with big announcements. We're coming in and we're going to change the world here in the United States. Wait till we get going and we can bring it cheaper and better than anyone else. So they don't go away. They never get started, but they never go away. Most recently, we've seen Candy saying they're going to localize a factory here. Li Auto, a listing last month. Xpeng about to list. And so even though there's no traction, they keep hanging around, which makes us go, well, wait a second. Are they not coming? Or are they coming? Which way is it? And it's disconcerting. It just doesn't follow a linear line. Like, oh yeah, they're not. They went home. They tried it. They're out.
Right.
They
well, and even with
away.
gas cars, we have sort of the Vantis brand launching in theory based on Chery, but it still remained. Look, even before the politics of this administration, which is a whole thing unto itself, it was an open question regarding how much the American market would accept a Chinese product. And so I've observed, I tend to break it into three buckets. I think of sort of the native Chinese companies, you know, Xpeng and all those guys would be in that camp, as well as sort of Great Wall and sort of the few big ones that everyone is, well, some are more familiar with on the inside baseball front. And then there's the sort of Chinese American hybrids, sort of Chinese money, American based, Faraday, Byton, Neo, that category. Which is somewhat different than the other one. And then there's the category that I always call the Trojan horses. So these days it's Volvo, Polestar, Saab, even JLR, Jaguar Land Rover. It's Indian, technically not Chinese, but that kind of thing. So familiar American European brand that no one ever thinks of as a Chinese or Indian car, but technically is. And they each seem to have a different approach, but it remains to be seen what any of them do with respect to cross-pollination of those markets. So far, the only thing we mostly see are these hybrid companies aiming at both US and China at the same time, which I find to be very strange. On one hand, we have Xpeng that seems to be completely emulating Tesla. But at the same time, if you look at the recent Cadillac announcements, you can see the influences of Byton and Faraday and others on more American incumbent vehicle design. So the design part's going both directions, but otherwise the deployment, well, mostly hasn't happened at all, but certainly remains to be.
Aside from Volvo and potentially Polestar, totally agree. And one way of thinking, especially with all the current acrimony, I mean, US-China relations are at the worst in 50 years. It's just really bad. I haven't seen anything like it in all my years. And I went there for the first time in 1986. So, and there's no sign on the horizon things are going to get better, even no matter who wins the election. So you begin to say, actually what we have in the United States and in China are two systems that are not alike, not compatible, and not getting more and more, not getting closer, actually defining their own turfs and their own ways of doing things. For a long time in the West, there was an expectation, well, China's joining the international community, they're joining the international economic world, and they'll abide by existing protocols and standards and ways of doing business. But more recently, it doesn't look that way. It looks like China said, well, we'd like to set some rules ourselves. We'd like to be the ones who set the standards for future technology, including electrics. We think our way is actually superior. So, and oh, by the way, we have second biggest economy in the world and 1.5 billion people and a lot of ambition. So what do you got?
Right.
Yeah, that's the kind of sentiment. So coming into our conversation today, I was thinking, if indeed we do have two different systems, one of the things coming back to the United States after living in Asia for so long that strikes me is that we in the West still, would like to feel most comfortable when we can project our knowledge of how markets work and how companies work onto the China scene and make sense of it that way.
Sure.
But it's like projecting German onto Japanese. It's going to be hit and miss, right? So let me give you 2 or 3 examples. First one is an easy one. GDP growth. It's an inside joke in China. Every year, it's 6.8% for the last 5 years in a row. Lands on 6. So what? So an announcement comes down from on high. Growth will be 6.8%. So all the provincial and city governments report that up. It has nothing to do with actual results in the economy as we know it.
Right.
Yeah. So, but we don't have any other data. So we go, yeah, China grew by 6.8%. So market demand, market growth should be this. So that's one. The second one would be capacity. We look at China, they have capacity to build 40 million cars a year right now, 40 million. This year, they'll be lucky to produce 25. So we've got a 15 million unit overhang. In any other market, is there any other market in the world that you wouldn't say, well, obviously that's going to consolidate in the next 6 months? It's unsustainable.
Right.
But China, because the government owns so much of the industry, and they find ways to keep companies alive and capacity alive, jobs, tax revenues, potential for future investment. Most recent example of that was NIO. They got into some financial trouble, and the city government in Hefei, Anhui province, landlocked province in the middle of China, goes, yeah, we got $1 billion for you, but make sure you bring the plant here and create jobs. So it's sort of like, well, wait a second. I can tell you for years and years, everyone's asked me, are we at the point where we're going to see that consolidation in China? And the reality is, if we did see it wouldn't be China. It's just not how the place works. So let's keep that in mind when we're looking at what our expectations are for China. They may be going in a different direction than what we're used to. Yeah.
Well, that's one of my questions around this hybrid model. I had a very disturbing, I found a disturbing conversation with.
We like disturbing conversations.
And this was now, I don't know, 6-7 years ago. But I asked him at the time, you're one of these newer hybrid companies. We already know that China very much favors domestic production, domestic batteries, all those things. And yet you guys are among the first taking great pride in being Chinese funded, but very much American-based, American brand, almost stomping a little too hard on that. How will you be seen when you try to launch in China? And what disturbed me was the answer from a founder of the company was, I don't know, we haven't really thought about that. But the NIO example suggests that they still see these very American companies as also very homegrown Chinese. So does that work in their favor to kind of take this approach of trying to play both sides at the same time?
Right. Gosh, they do like that California presence back in the home market. It gives them an exclusivity, a distinction, a prestige, no doubt about it. So Karma will be the first to tell you, we're a California company. We're design, we're build cars here, and then
Karma will tell you all sorts of things.
Say what?
Karma will tell you all sorts of things.
Right. So, right, they like the U.S. presence for the R&D, and they like the U.S. California presence for the distinction of designed in California. But the manufacturing in the market, more times than not, is going to be back home where the government gives all kinds of incentives to
right.
Yeah.
Well, and certainly we've seen a little bit of that with with NIO, hasn't really done much here, and is sort of, I mean, for the last few years has basically been seen as kind of circle in the drain, and yet has managed to get some money and deploy some cars in China, arguably more than the Faradays of the world and the rest of the sort of hybrid companies. So, and Lucid similarly was in that camp, but their last round of money came from Saudi Arabia, so they're not so much in that camp anymore, and yet they're also playing the California base, but we want to appeal to everybody and not saying very much about actually.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
EVs. Have we turned the corner with Tesla's sensational run in share prices, proving out the model, at least apparently proving out the model that an EV could be spectacularly successful and draw investment? And now NIO's share price are way up, Li Auto's coming up. Do you feel, based on your experience, that this 2020 is a pivotal year in terms of electric vehicles, or is it just another chapter in a very long book that'll have all kinds of twists and turns? How are you seeing it?
It's the latter. I think it's the latter. And I was going to, so similar, I was going to ask the same question to you, because I have listened to your podcast and some of your other stuff. And yes, if you're interested in this topic, go look it up while we're chatting, because you can do multiple things at the same time. Winning in Asia. He also has a YouTube channel with little shorter clips. Both of them are very interesting and fun. But yes, I see. It seems to me like we're very much on another bubble in a variety of ways. So on one hand, everyone wants to be kind of the next Tesla, and they have been the singular example, certainly among EV startups, but among automotive startups that have existed and survived and been successful, depending on how you define success, over the last dozen or so years. And so everyone sort of thinks if they can do it, we can do it, which frankly is how the Faradays of the world got started too, and decided to come here. I mean, we've been watching that I'm going to be the next Tesla thing happening basically for at least 8 years. Similarly, on autonomous vehicles, everybody wants their piece of that. And it reminds me of the late 2000s VC bubble of everyone trying to invest in a car company, regardless of what it was or whether it was a smart idea. And same thing with all these new ones, that sure, there's lots of money sloshing around, and the latest chunk of it certainly has been from China, SoftBank and all of those, and yet it's not sustainable. And those companies that were initially born of it, those half dozen hybrid companies, have not really achieved anything that would be presented as success, let alone the candies of the world now trying to do exactly the same thing. But I think also everybody ignores that Tesla came about in a really specific moment in time. And 10 years ago, when Coda was about as an American startup, but based on a Chinese car, it was that kind of thought as well, that perhaps if a Chinese product came into the market so early that it had no competition, no question Coda A was not the right product, but that there was some built up appetite for EVs, and somebody might have been able to build some similar momentum to a Tesla back then. But anyone entering now, incumbent or startup, now has an increasingly crowded marketplace to compete with. And all of the legacy of foreign brands and all of those other things. So
what's your view on those legacy, say, global OEMs, call them Volkswagen, who's really getting ambitious about EVs, or GM this week now? Is there, on paper at least, they have a lot of resources and experience in manufacturing that would allow them to leapfrog or make a huge comeback and surpass the EV-only specialists like Tesla or Rivian.
Right.
On the other hand, if you look at the market says, no, Tesla's so focused and so good that they're left in the dust. They're culturally unable to make those adjustments. What's your view? 5 years from now, are we going to see the existing legacy automakers make a massive comeback, or do you see a new generation of Tesla, Rivian, and others really going from strength to strength and putting a distance between them and the legacy players?
I have a similar opinion to the incumbents that I have for, frankly, some of the larger Chinese companies, which is the day they decide they want to, they have the ability to do it.
Okay.
I am not necessarily as optimistic based on 25 years that most of the incumbents will reach that point within the next 5. A couple will start making some strong strides toward it. There will still be laggards in the next 5 years.
So they're
yeah.
waiting for what? For profitability, or what are they waiting for?
Yeah, I mean, they're waiting for profitability. They're also just milking the thing that they have. If we look at it from their point of view, it's not a matter of like they're all a bunch of assholes, but they make money doing something they understand really well, are familiar with, are comfy with, and transitioning. You know, change is hard for humans. There's a lot of it that is just basic human quality, and we get overly cynical about the background on that, but it really is that simple. It's the product planner or the manager or the VP that's going, yeah, I got retirement in a few years, and I need to think about the plan that was laid out for my bonus and my retirement. It's not, you know, we give people way too much credit on the conspiracy front sometimes.
Way too much, yeah.
Yeah.
And we look at the century of inertia, the dealers and everybody is geared to this one kind of product. And all of a sudden, hey, here's this great, exciting new thing.
Right. And it's not rocket science to think about how to change that, but neither do we need to assign motivations that are not necessarily present. But that said, I think the incumbents have the opportunity to become, you know, IBM or Microsoft, not Tesla. I think it is unlikely that any of them become Tesla, because Tesla is sort of the Apple analogy. So yes, there's a huge amount of market opportunity that is not Tesla or Apple, but the cool cachet of Tesla or Apple, you know, analogy, relatively speaking, is going to be difficult for any of the incumbents to do. It's not in their culture or their DNA. There's no logistics or mechanical reason they couldn't aim for that, but it's not who they are. And they don't have really any of them anymore, these sort of culty leader personality types. You know, Carlos Ghosn was kind of one of those, but there are other issues going on there. You know, Mark GM is one of the more candid personality types in the industry, but there just aren't, there's not a lot of Elons out there. And any of them who wanted to become that would be accused of trying to copy him. I mean, there's so many double standards between Tesla and everybody else.
Trevor Milton.
Yes, well, Trevor Milton for sure is aspiring to be that, and we'll see how that works out for them, for Nikola. They've certainly managed to garner a lot of hype, but they've also garnered a lot of us looking at them as not as credible, specifically because of his behavior. So there's pros.
What about Rivian? What's your feeling about Rivian?
Actually, Rivian is promising, and I think has the ability to be the next Tesla, although they're taking a different path. I appreciate that their company and their leadership is much more humble, is not out there trying to be the next Elon, is very much in the we're going to underpromise and overdeliver camp. You know, and spending a little bit of time with them, they all kind of are that way. And we did a fully charged episode with Rivian some months ago, and the funniest part to me, because we were there all day, it takes a long time to film one of those, all the employees that kept coming up to me going, oh, you get to go to all the startups, how do we compare?
Okay, good.
And not in an egotistical way.
Yeah,
they were
terrific. That's a really good
and just trying to, like, are we doing this right? Are we, you know, it was very, very earnest, which was appealing to somebody like me, because it wasn't trying to be the shoutiest one in the room or the tallest poppy, as they would say in New Zealand. It just was, we are all in on this, and we're not trying to be the loudest in the bunch. I also have noted the difference in strategy, even on the trucks, setting aside their Amazon vans and goods movement side, just on the trucks between Tesla and Cybertruck and Rivian. Elon has very much sort of made the Cybertruck concept and says, this is what I've decided people will want. Rivian is like the Saturn approach of, we've created this thing and we're going to go out and do a whole bunch of events with our pre-order customers, and like, do you like this flashlight? Do you like these cargo nets? Does this feature work for you? And really try to iterate based on what customers want.
They might both get there.
Right. That's exactly it. Is they both have this big fan base, but very differently so. And Rivian is one of the only startups since that the Tesla people do not trash generally. And many of the Tesla folks have an order for a Rivian because the Cybertruck design isn't for everybody, or they're hedging their bets, or they want multiple vehicles. But yeah, so Rivian seems the most promising to kind of walk in that footstep, even though it's not exactly the same path. The others so far are mostly dismissed, and some of that is unfair, and some of it is fair. We've got a lot of history of over-promising and under-delivering from new companies and incumbent ones on the EV front. So there's very much this attitude now of like, show me, don't tell me. Your press release is nice, but I want to see you build some cars.
And at the same time, we have these SPACs now that are
Yes.
way backing into the market and being able to do so despite all the warning signs to say, hey, we've seen this show before, but.
Right. Yeah, and those seem the most bubbly of all. You know, Fisker, Canoe is the most recent one. You know, however, similarly, like however decent the ideas might be, this notion of going public through SPACs, I mean, their long-term financial success seems more dubious.
Mm-hmm. What's your view on the evolution of, you know, if we roll the clock back 5 years ago, even, it was something to have an electric car with range,
right?
That was safe and had range and convenient charging. Those are going to be major breakthroughs. Today, if you look at, if we take Tesla as an exceptional benchmark, you have electric plus connected plus autonomous, potentially ride-sharing network going on.
Right.
Is it enough to be a really good electric vehicle, maybe like a Lucid, or do you think that the game has changed and electric vehicle makers of the future will need to incorporate all three of those sort of elements beyond electric?
Both, but for different reasons. So the feature about Tesla, you know, I'm often deemed a Tesla hater because I don't think they can absolutely do no wrong or that they've done everything perfect along the way. But a thing I think they get less credit than they deserve is the OTA updates. So everyone tends to focus on the superchargers, and that's important, certainly for marketing reasons. But via their OTA updates, they have basically conditioned the market to expect that the car I buy today will get better tomorrow, preferably while sitting in my garage. But even if someone had to go to a dealer for an update, it's that notion of it gets better over time that has been somewhat spoiling, certainly for the premium side of the EV market. On the other hand, I think China has actually, and you would know better, China has had more influence on some of the range fronts. Yes. Where in the US historically, 300 miles has kind of been the bogey, even though many gas cars only can sort of do that. But when I actually assisted an automaker with some focus groups a few years ago for their new EV product, both American-based and China-based. And what was interesting is the Chinese focus groups had vastly different expectations of range, basically premised on diesel. So diesel, like Europe, is such a thing that their expectations were 500-600 miles, not 300 like the US focus groups. And they didn't, I mean, the mileage actually was a little bit higher. It's more like 60 miles versus 35 daily driving. But this notion of, 300 miles is nothing for us. And so when I see Lucid go for 517, part of it is that's the latest manhood measuring contest. 3 years ago it was all about torque and horsepower, but now it's range and efficiency and things like that, some of which are worthier than others. But it's also that influence, I think, of international markets expecting a more, higher benchmark.
Yes, Xpeng says 411, I think, on their P7 sports sedan. Do we know who is the supplier to Lucid, the battery?
They do their own batteries.
Their own battery.
They're making their own packs. Yeah, they have not disclosed so much their cell suppliers.
I mean, it's something to come out. If you said Tesla and Xpeng are at 410, 415, if you come out with 450, you're already going, whoa, you're making a statement. Right. For them to go above 500, a lot of eyes are focused on that story.
Although a lot of it is in motor efficiency now. That's that current bogey. It's not so much the batteries. It's how do I get a motor that cools more efficiently, that doesn't require so much power, so that still everyone's looking at the same small handful of battery suppliers for cells at least, but how can I squeeze more out of that?
The magic's in the motor.
Some of it, yeah. I mean, as much as we're aiming at better batteries also, and long term, there's probably more to be gained on the battery side, it would be my guess, but there is a little bit to be gained on the motor side. And lightweighting, I mean, folks haven't really started to play that much with that yet, other than a little bit of aluminum panel stuff. But that will also be a bogey over time, is how do we pull weight out of these cars, and all cars, even petrol-based ones.
You mentioned the expectation of longer range among international and Chinese consumers. That's accurate. They're really demanding. They don't want to have any sense of range anxiety. And one of the adjustments that Tesla has made along the way, they have a huge supercharger network there, as you know. But unlike the US, in China, they placed a lot of their supercharger stations inside the cities, next
Yeah.
to high-end malls or hotels. And the purpose of that is to make it as easy as possible for people on their commute to charge up. The other thing, of course, is that if you've been to Shanghai or Beijing or Guangzhou, you'll know that there are very, very few single-family homes. Almost everybody lives in an apartment, so charging, potentially a real issue at home.
Right.
That eliminates the Chinese consumer, very demanding. So
Yeah.
Tesla looks like it understands that and has gone extra steps to make it work in China.
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing I loved about the disparity between the two markets is this new trend for features as a service, like features by subscription that automakers want to pursue, or pay to unlock a feature permanently, as Tesla has done with batteries before. But as they want to explore that more, I find, and Cadillac recently announced that Super Cruise will be available by subscription, and others have played with other features.
Yes.
The American, well, across the board, there was kind of a hard line of software-based stuff we're more open to. If you put hardware on my car, I expect to own it or not, and be able to use it full-time or not. I'm less open to subscribing to hardware. But the Chinese focus groups were the most candid of all, who said, yeah, we're just gonna hack your shit. Like, and not the young 20-year-old. It was like the 45-year-old executive businessman in a suit going, yeah, I got a guy. No, I'm not gonna subscribe to your feature.
They'll find a way, right? Just this last week, not on OTAs, but just this last week, Pinduoduo is the name of a really big third-party site to do transactions. And make a long story short, Pinduoduo had a lottery where they said, a certain number of our customers will get the Tesla Model 3 at a $10,000 discount. And so Pinduoduo actually took those people's identities and acted like they're ordering from Tesla in a straight transaction, but they weren't. It went through Pinduoduo. So, that's the kind of surprises that Tesla is going to confront over and over again in China. That whether it's people hacking their system or doing a workaround and that could potentially hurt the brand or undermine pricing integrity and things like that. So, but so far Tesla's been hitting it out of the park. 50,000 sales in the first half, on track for 100,000 this year. And what's interesting about it, they've taken aim at the entry-level luxury segment, which is huge in China. Your BMW 3s, your Mercedes, it's very much not because it's electric. It's very much is because it's Tesla exclusive, Elon, prestigious, new, advanced technology, and the average transaction price is right around $50,000. So they're getting their pricing there too.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, they're definitely the bogey. And so I don't come from the standpoint that, yeah, those are likely to catch them, certainly from a fan standpoint for sure, but that there's lots of other room. But there is no single automaker for everyone in any kind of propulsion system is kind of what it comes down to. And variety is the only thing that will help grow the market. So yes, more diversity of models from companies like Tesla, but also more diversity from other companies as well.
Yes.
And that's the opportunity.
What's your view on US versus Europe versus China? I think I saw the other day that Europe actually this year is neck and neck with China in terms of EV sales, which is, whoa, okay, they're really on a tear. What's your ranking and where do you see things heading in the next 3 to 5 years if we look at those three regions? What's your feeling?
I see the US has fallen behind and will probably remain behind. And frankly, almost no matter what happens with the election, because that's the obvious next question. But I think that that generally speaking, there's some similarities between US and Europe in that both of those markets have pockets of deep concentration. So like Norway is the California of Europe, vice versa. Netherlands versus Germany, who's starting now, but is comparatively one of the laggards among Europe. And so that will continue apace, and certainly to the extent that CO2 standards hold, automakers are planning for that. But everyone has gotten complacent about China taking off. But what remains to be seen is the degree to which China influences everybody else. This cross-pollination topic remains an open one for me. So while on one hand, I can see that any large Chinese automaker with some capacity could aim for US or Europe tomorrow if they wanted to, I don't expect that any of them will really concentrate outside of China for 5 years, maybe, at least a few.
Totally agree. Things are so comfortable at home, starting with government support. Subsidies are going away, but they're replaced by quotas. Infrastructure investments, charging networks are the government's pouring money in there. You've got the familiarity of your own language, your own customers, their expectations.
Right.
All that is so easy in a big home market. So why take on, most Chinese companies are afraid to come to the United States first and foremost because they think they're going to get sued. They say,
Fair enough.
we got a great product,
most litigious
we're
country.
so terrified we're going to get sued. And I think, well, yeah, that is a good chance of that happening. So
Right.
layer on top of that the political tensions, which are real.
Yes. Oh no, they're absolutely real.
Yes.
And even if they didn't exist, there would still be significant hurdles. So those just are the layers.
Layers and layers. And then what's just so mind-boggling is that at the same time you do have these listings in New York, Li Auto last month, XPeng coming soon, Canoe, and yet at the same time that the DC is talking about delisting all Chinese firms from the exchanges in the United States, and with some good reason. The Chinese are not. It's complicated, a little bit complex, but basically when Chinese companies list in the United States, they're not obligated or forced to divulge all of their financial history as any a company from any other country would be. Why? Because China's regulatory agency says much of that information may be related to national security, so we don't want our companies divulging that. So it's sort of a sovereignty issue for the Chinese. They're really showing their muscle there. And as a result, if you're investing in a Chinese company on the New York Stock Exchange, know that the chances that there's some unstated history there it's pretty good.
Wow.
It's risky. So we'll know in the next few months, those Chinese companies may in fact be delisted just shortly after being listed here.
So in that event, do we see the opposite of what's kind of happening with China, in that like Candy tries to join up with Canoe, like the new JVs and partnerships with American companies to try to be seen that way, the same way that startups and incumbents are partnering with Chinese car companies there.
Right. I think 5 years ago that would have sailed easily.
Right.
Today, there's so much vigilance, so much scrutiny. What's going on here?
Yeah.
And in particular, something new to me is so-called export controls. So if a Chinese company is doing R&D in California and wishes to bring that technology back to China, it now must apply for a license to do so. Oh, okay, that's new. Well, what are you taking out of our country? And you need to secure a license. That's brand new, and that's really stopping the Chinese in their tracks, thinking, uh-oh, there used to be green light all the time. Now there's ambers and reds for us.
Yeah. So you have coined the whole Fab Five term, because there's all this talk of like lots and lots of Chinese companies, but the smaller handful that are worth kind of paying attention to in our world and on EVs. So XPeng, NIO, Polestar, Volvo.
Yes.
Who are the others?
Yes, those are the top three. In fact, I wish I could call them the Fab Three, but it wouldn't fit with the analogy to the Michigan basketball team. Okay, Fab Five. So NIO, XPeng, and Polestar have as top shelf companies, legitimate, well-funded, smart people leading them, billionaires who've done it elsewhere. Volvo rolling up to Geely and Nishufu. And then you have WM Motor and Byton were the Fab Five earlier this year. So WM continues to cruise along. What's interesting to me is that they've stated over and over again that they are aiming for, say, middle or upper middle class China, not premium, not luxury. But in recent advertising and promotion marketing, I've seen them inching up saying, hey, why fight it? Let's also join that. So from a brand point of view, I don't think that they were on key to begin with. They're sort of middling. And so good product, well managed, former Volvo Geely executive, Freeman Shen running the thing. He knows cars, he knows the car business, and it's a good product. So that's WM. Byton is a little bit of a sad story, at least for the time being. Terrific product. Pebble Beach, they've been to CES a couple years in a row. They've got that huge screen, connectivity, world-class R&D in Munich, in San Jose. And you look at the product, you go, this is quality. Co-founded by a couple Germans who used to work at BMW, but they ran into a storm for funding this right in the middle of COVID and hit a wall. So they've been forced to pause operations. So it's a great lesson to look at a company that's doing all the right things and really putting quality first. And then, oh, wait a second, we don't have money. What now? So
yeah, although I have to say it gave some of us pause when their CEO left to run Faraday.
Yes.
And sort of, and actually I went to visit Faraday not long after that transition, and in one of my moments of candor, I asked him that question of what does it say about Byton that you left for Faraday?
Yes. What did he say?
Oh, he gave me a pat PR answer, but the look on his face was not so pleased. Yeah, he really believes in what Faraday's doing, blah, blah, blah. He won't trash Byton, of course, but it was such an obvious elephant in the room at the time.
Right. You were at Byton and now you're at Faraday,
which has been,
complexity.
We all have friends there, and there's this weird little thing of like, you want everyone to succeed. I always liken it to like raising children. You want them to succeed, but the fact that you're their parent doesn't keep you from seeing them for exactly who they are, strengths and weaknesses. It's kind of the same thing with all the EV companies. I want you all to succeed, but I can't ignore the fact that these are not strengths.
I can't ignore the fact that this is not going the way according to plan. So
yes, especially when
Neo, I like a lot.
We just need $80 million. Like as soon as we're ready. Like, well, how do you doubt us? Self-awareness isn't your strong suit, is it?
Well, one of the things I remember about Byton that struck me, they really made a point when they're starting out saying, other companies are raising $1 billion+ We're going to take a different approach. We're only going to raise as much as we need for the next quarter or two. Otherwise, we're under pressure to spend money. We'll be sloppy with it. We won't be disciplined in it. Coming from a couple of German guys, I go, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. You're very transparent. This is the money we need. Here are the next steps. Here's our plan. We have a very concise, precise plan. That all made sense until they ran out of money. There is no cushion. Okay, what if we don't get that next round? It's curtains. So, yes. So
yeah. Well, so another question I have for you about that era of these companies and all of the screens, because we've seen this transition from knobs to screens, and Tesla started to some degree for vehicle controls, but then we entered the sort of Faraday Byton era of all screens all the time, preferably like 7 of them in the car and little neon. I came to call it like the Vegas brothel look on some of these concept interiors. And the premise was based largely on those that were investing, the Chinese investors, which are largely content companies. The Googles and Netflixes of China are largely the companies investing in some of these. And the premise was their real interest was in selling content subscriptions, not so much in building a good car, but building a thing you'll love to sit in and watch stuff. So was that ever the right premise, and is it still? Because it doesn't seem to be so much of an emphasis in more recent years.
I do get where they're coming from, and the Chinese are on their phones or on their screens constantly, more so than any other market I've been in the world, and getting more so every day. So I think the direction was right, and there's they like to in-car commerce, they like to stream entertainment. It is a reality. Now, one of the things I wonder about is that huge screen. You'd almost have to say, well, when you're sitting in traffic in Beijing and Shanghai and you're not moving, this is perfect. But
Right.
as soon as you start driving, wow, all that going on in front of you, it can be it feels overwhelming just sitting in the car. So
Yeah.
the connectivity direction is the right one. I think we'll see more and more of that, just as we see with companies like ZoZoGo here in the United States, which was acquired by Lear last year, where you have more and more commerce in the car. The automakers want that business in the car.
Yes.
That's going to take off in China for sure. I'm just not sure about the medium and whether or not that massive screen is the answer.
Yeah, well, and that remains, I mean, it's also seemed premise on autonomy coming faster than it is. And that didn't surprise many of us, but that notion of we're gonna have level 5 by next year and we could, you can just sit back and watch a movie and your car will get you there is obviously not turning out to be so true. And we're in this sort of—
You remind me, I think Biden's tagline was time to be. So the idea was you're in this traffic, you're not going to have to drive, you're just going to enjoy your TV. And yes, we're not there yet.
And we won't be to that level for quite some time. I mean, we're still trying to scale the level 2, 3 valley of death, if we're honest about what that is.
Yes.
And the challenge of allowing people to maybe not be so much in control, but also get them back when you need them. And the abuse we're watching happen in certain systems and the way that they're communicated about. So how that is navigated going forward, I think also impacts a lot of this screen stuff, but I also see the regulators having something to say. I mean, I'm surprised NHTSA hasn't jumped in already on OTA and having some influence on what you're allowed to update over the air. All of a sudden I don't have emergency braking anymore and I didn't know it because people check their box to accept the software the same way you do on your phone without reading the changes. So I expect there'll be some adult supervision on screen sizes and OTA options and some of those things at some point, and similarly around the world.
We started to talk about VW a little bit in terms of a legacy automaker making big, and would you agree they're among the legacy automakers, they're the most audacious or bullish or boldest? Yeah. They
are promising to be. So I have this particular point of view, which is very much, I look forward to seeing that. So yes, I get the whole, like everyone going, we've spent $7 billion. I understand all of that. Show me some cars in volume. I know that these are coming, like in theory, we should, in the next year or so, we should have a better idea. Until they start arriving in larger than e-golf volumes, they are an incumbent automaker that looks promising, but hasn't yet deployed. And I find that with many of them, there are some blind spots that leave me a little bit concerned, especially in certain regions. And it is mainly that they believe building and engineering a decent car is enough. And so what I find in several of the global car companies that have sort of a distributorship model for somebody else, in this case, German versus the US, like we built this car primarily in Germany, engineered it, designed it and everything. We're gonna appoint 3 people at Volkswagen of America to run an entire EV program for the US at the volumes we're promising. So that I find that type of model to not to be as sustainable, whether it is Volkswagen or Nissan or whoever is doing it. I look at the human resources allocated to also be an indication of their seriousness.
Human resources. I also was struck to this week, GM had a big tech day in Shanghai. And the headline, I believe was in Reuters, was that 40% of new models over the next 3 years will be EVs. GM announces 40% of new model launches will be EVs. So, so the obvious, 60% won't. So that's kind of important. And among the EVs, model launches doesn't mean you mentioned sales volume. Model launches is model launches. Well, how much of your sales does that equate to? You've seen the show before.
And so by nature, Volkswagen is a much larger volume. I mean, especially if we sort of separate out Porsche, like Porsche and Audi make all the money for the Volkswagen group primarily, but as you go down the food chain, the volumes get larger. And certainly Dieselgate and all of its ramifications are a unique thing that applies to Volkswagen and not so much everybody else. So yes, for a variety of reasons, I think ultimately they're going to have to make good on putting some cars on the road in volumes that people like me would appreciate. But how they do that and a lot of the details separate what is a compliance car versus not, separate success from it's okay. Even if we've seen examples of companies that were very sincere in wanting to sell lots of something and still got in their own way in some form. Yeah, so wanting to and being sincere is also not necessarily enough. If you don't understand the market you're aiming at, you can still spend a lot of time and money and not achieve very much.
How do you see Mercedes, BMW, Audi stacking up with regards to EVs? Because Audi arguably should have an edge because of the association with Volkswagen. On the other hand, Mercedes is dedicated a whole new division, right? So BMW seems to be splitting the difference. Do you have a horse you'd bet on among the top 3 German premiums when it comes to EVs?
I have been the least impressed with Mercedes. And so far the talking hasn't been enough to change that.
Impressed in what regard?
They have deployed the least electrified things on the road that still have plugs. Even with California's very permissive laws of what gets into HOV lanes, Mercedes plug-in hybrids are not electrified enough to qualify. So, a 6 kilowatt-hour battery pack in something. That does not inspire lots of confidence for me. I look forward to the EQ range of things, and certainly we've seen the last several years of concepts at CES that look like different versions of soap bars. But as a company, they have not much really engaged on this topic in a legitimate way. I hope that changes, and I look forward to seeing that.
Do you think that's financial pressure? The share price has not done well. Zetch is gone. A lot of uncertainty. Geely's the number 1
shareholder. Started long before that. I think they kind of hung back. I mean, actually, we see quite a bit of introductions paced specifically to when CARB required it. So the first automakers that had to comply with the ZEV regulations were the Americans and Japanese. The Germans and Koreans as a category generally had to start coming in around 2018. Which is why we started to see compliance volumes of the B class. If you started earlier, you got more credit, which is also why we started to see the i3 available earlier and beyond just the CARB states. So BMW gets credit for being the earliest of those 3 companies and going beyond what they really had to do, at least with the i3. The i8 is kind of a different animal. Audi and Porsche both get credit for starting on their EV paths well before Dieselgate. I mean, the history will always remember it as they did EVs because that's not really true, at least in the case of those 2 divisions of Volkswagen. So Volkswagen's premise for the US was largely, we'll do some plug-in hybrids as the Volkswagen brand. We're going to let Audi and Porsche do the EV stuff because they'll get away with more premium cars that have to be more expensive in order to be profitable or even break even. That's changed because of Dieselgate, and Volkswagen now is accepting that its brand has to go electric maybe sooner than it otherwise would have wanted. The picture in Europe is kind of similar, except that volumes were increased for Europe across the board. So, I mean, going forward, I think Volkswagen probably overtakes BMW. Where Mercedes decides to come in remains to be seen, but it's kind of a BMW Volkswagen group conversation for now. And frankly, Mercedes will end up going up against Tesla more than others.
Yes.
But I'm just one girl with a point of view. So we'll see.
What do you hear about the Model Y? There's great expectations for the Y following on the heels of the 3, but it seems like it's been quiet, or there's issues with production. I don't have a clear view on that. What's the word on the street with the Y? Doing okay?
I think there's still lots of anticipation. I'm sure Russell has a point of view on this too. It has had, I think, a concerning number of quality issues, which is not unusual for Tesla with every new model it introduces. How quickly they can get arms around that is their challenge. And there's still even a few more quality issues on things like Model X than I would expect at this point. But as they try to go down the market, those buyers are going to be less tolerant of issues. They still are benefiting from a certain amount of fan base that believes enough in what they're doing that they'll be more tolerant, but that will also wear off at some point.
I anticipated that it would be after the Model 3, which went through all kinds of ramp issues, that Model Y would really just come in and accelerate momentum for the company across the board. Terrific product with a little bit more SUV look. And it's just, I know a handful of people who ordered and either were going to have to wait or weren't sure. And it just doesn't seem like it's taken off as expected.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, pandemic, I mean, there's certain things that can be somewhat forgiven for all of the companies involved. And there's also an open question about the degree to which Model Y sales are cannibalizing their other models. So depending on how that shift goes, but also manufacturing is a big question right now, and really scaling in a way that produces really consistently good quality over time.
You mentioned cannibalizing. One of the things we're watching in China is that, you know, initially they introduced the S, then the X, and they were selling thousands of, maybe at the peak before the Model 3, maybe it got up to, volumes got up to maybe close to 20,000. And since the launch of the Model 3, those have either flattened or gone down.
Right.
So despite the fact that China has a huge luxury car market, I think it'll be 3 million units a year by 2025. I fully expected the S for sure, and maybe the X, if its issues were sorted out, that they would too, and maybe they will. Maybe they will. Maybe Model 3 buyers today will trade up, but it comes as a little bit of surprise that I haven't seen the demand for the S and X that we have even here in the US.
Yeah, I would have expected much more demand for the larger vehicles there, just because there is at least a significant appetite for that size. That's why all the American companies are developing long wheelbase cars.
Yes, yes. They are imported, which almost doubles the price of the car. So maybe if they localize it, it'll change the game. But yeah,
we shall see.
Yeah.
So we're about an hour. I have one more topic that I want to cover. Russell, you can chime in with anything you want. But going back to NIO, one of the things that caught some news is that they are going back to swapping batteries.
Right.
So swapping has kind of a legacy as a topic. I mean, obviously Better Place is the best known as a company that formed around that notion, although the question has been asked and answered multiple times since the mid-90s when this all kind of started as the modern EV era. Tesla did it for a minute and a half, but primarily to game the CARB ZEV mandate. But NIO seems more sincere about it as an infrastructure solution. I have some doubts about how that would play, but I'm curious if the Chinese market may respond differently to it. In your view.
You know, here again, we're looking at, I think a good way to look at it is the government would say, how do we differentiate? How do we remain globally competitive? How do we lead in a new industry with new standards? And NIO started to develop a supercharger network like Tesla's, but I think at last count, they only have 25 or 30 stations, and Tesla has
thousands.
Thousands, yeah. So there's no match, no mas. So I see NIO pivoting and saying, okay, let's not go head to head. We're not going to win that. Let's see if we can go to and make this swapping work, and also get the government to subsidize, support, or otherwise legislate our success. So that's my read there. It isn't that I don't feel as though they had some major technical breakthrough that allows them to do swapping better than anyone else, but they're taking cues from central government. How do we differentiate, and will we get backing?
Right. But that still has, I mean, so I do argue regularly that we shouldn't be collectively pursuing more walled gardens of infrastructure. And I know that's true for the US. I believe it's probably true for China and Europe as well, that fine, Tesla has their own, but we shouldn't be encouraging every automaker to set up their own charging versus adopting standards so that people of any car can collectively use and therefore economize on the infrastructure expense. So on one hand, it's going down this path again with no standardization, which is far more difficult on a swapping scenario than adding an extra $1,000 connector to a charger.
Yes.
but it's also premised on the notion that drivers don't mind the swapping.
Mhm.
And that's another part that has not proven true. So the analogy is basically propane tanks and barbecues, and you exchange those and you don't care which one you get. I mean, that's kind of the example that swapping proponents tend to use. What we know about the market to date and for the next few years, because we're still kind of early adopter stage, they don't think of their batteries like propane tanks. Some of them have very special feelings about how they're cared for, don't want to give that one up and get something potentially different. But also, if you just look at the manufacturer spec of what's within quality versus not, there's a huge amount of capacity degradation before something's considered degraded enough to replace from a battery standpoint. And even the warranties are around 70%. So the notion of turning in a battery at 90% capacity and getting one back at 70, and therefore having a very significant unexpected range difference in practicality, all of these goofy little things play into the acceptance of something like a swapping scenario, which is why I don't expect it will be wholly different there than it is here.
Yes.
But I could see it coming down to Chinese government saying, there is this standard, you will all use this, but that will limit automaker participation and subsidizing the cost. But it still strikes me as the hardest thing to do for the least amount of gain.
The swapping, I'm just reminded that NIO is in talks with Xpeng to share swapping stations. So at least there'd be more than one automaker there, and maybe that becomes the standard. The other thing is, you mentioned walled gardens. So I'm always reminded, people ask me, hey, what's the story? Chinese people long-term thinkers or short-term thinkers? Long-term, short-term. And depending on the situation, I've been in meetings where they go, oh, here we go again. The Chinese are always so long-term oriented. And then the next meeting, oh, the Chinese are so short-term. So how to think about that? Not a perfect summary of the situation, but pretty good guide is the government, central government in particular, definitely long-term oriented. So they'd be in favor of a standardized charging system, national network, and all the rest. So they put that out there. Then the private sector is looking around. They're definitely maybe the shortest term people I know anywhere. They're just looking opportunity next week. Can I make a buck?
Right.
So they would build an infrastructure for swap, not thinking long-term, just thinking I can get subsidy and make money on this in the next 2 years, done.
Sure.
And so as a result, you have tremendous levels of contradiction within the system. It doesn't look pretty.
Well, the Tesla exploit was built on, the California ZEV mandate had, each car gets different credits. So if you have more range, you get more credits. And if you can fast fuel, which is sort of a 90% refuel within 10 minutes, you got more credits. And it was basically something that was created to favor hydrogen because it had more of a gas station type of filling profile. But Tesla saw this and went, swapping would count. And so they started building every Model S at the time, because the X wasn't even out yet, that technically had swapping capability. And the state finally saw that and went, yeah, but we don't, they got extra credits for every car, even though there was not a single swapping station in the world. And then the state kind of said, okay, but there has to be infrastructure. So they built and continued to get all the credits. And then finally the state said, you only get credit for the actual swaps. So similarly, this sounds a lot like—
Why didn't you tell us that in the first place?
I'm sorry?
Yeah, they said, why didn't you say that in the first place?
Right. Well, yeah, but Tesla knew, and they just kept walking down the path. And it was an interesting fight for a few years. But this strikes me very similarly as a potential exploit, depending on the details of supportive policy. And
details, and then at the central level, and we know the story, there's this expression in Chinese, the top makes the policies, the bottom takes countermeasures.
Right.
上有政策，下有对策. So whatever the policy is up top, you have Guangdong going this way and Fujian going that way and Shanghai going that way. That's what makes it so fascinating. Yeah.
Yes. Well, the complexity is what's fun for people like us.
We like that.
We do.
Yes.
And obviously we could chat forever, but I want to be a little bit respectful of your day.
You might have something else to do.
Yes.
Maybe.
Right.
I
But
just think you'll have to come back and play again.
I was
you
just
now
going to
have
say.
the password to the Treehouse, so.
Beautiful. It hasn't changed. It's the same one.
It's the same one. I'll send you a text if we have to.
I have not divulged that to anyone, and I won't.
Perfect.
I can't make threats on video, so. But I am here in San Diego, Michael.
Yeah, we're
Are you
all
really?
Southern California today, so that
Yes,
lucked out.
this is a Southern California episode.
Yeah, so we're
All
all
happened.
sweltering in the heat.
It's all happening on the West Coast.
Yes, for
There
sure.
you go. Well, a huge thanks to Michael Dunne for coming on and spending so much time with us today. I was dumbfounded. I didn't really, I made a bunch of notes, but I didn't really have like,
Still don't say anything.
I'm too busy listening to like, yeah, we definitely have to have you back on again because there's so many
Great. Let's
things.
do it.
Yeah, I mean, the relationship with China is huge and complex and interesting and developing rapidly sometimes, and no one can overstate its importance. So,
Can I get just to close out some excitement with some excitement? Can I get a prediction from each of you on where Tesla will be share price at the end of 2020? No, nobody knows. No one knows. But let's just have some fun in the treehouse. What's your number? I think it's around 2,000 today. Where is it going to be after the election, December 31st? What do you think?
that's me passing it to you, Chelsea.
You're the former employee. I mean, come on.
Okay, I'll get this out of the way. I so don't care about the Tesla share price. It's so illogical. It's so disconnected from actually what their business is, which is selling things. It's all about something else. And I'm not that much of a stock maven where I'm going to pretend that I know why Tesla is selling for $2,000 a share. There's a 5-to-1 split coming up today. So
Yeah,
that's,
in a moment.
yeah, that's going to, obviously that's helping goose this thing up. It's going to make it easier for it to go up even higher. What I'm more concerned about is on December 31st, how many cars has Tesla sold worldwide? And what's their year over year? Even with the pandemic, I suspect that we're not going to see fundamentals in the company that support any share price. I'm not saying it should be worth zero. I'm just saying $2,000 a share is cray-cray.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Yeah,
Chelsea?
I mean, sort of what you said, for sure, is their price has never really been based on logic. I expect it will be lower specifically because I know they're aiming for splits and things to make it lower so that more people can get in. So on a per share price, it would almost have to be much lower. But the total valuation of the company wouldn't surprise me if it's higher than it is now.
Wow.
Although, in fairness, very little surprises me about Tesla.
Yeah.
And there's only a few more months in the year, so.
What do you think, Michael?
I think we're in uncharted territory. It's thrilling to watch how a company like this can have so much, be such a source of emotion. It's such an emotional driver for so many people. And if you read the report, if you read the reports, people are either super high on the company or super negative. And it goes its own way. It's found its way to 2,000. A couple of years ago, Nomura Securities approached me to give a talk on Tesla. At the time that the shares were trading around $200. And one of their analysts said, you know what, we'd like to be really, really crazy bullish and put a target out there for 400. And when they did that, this is 2 years ago or so, everyone else in the industry said, you guys are just trying to get attention. There's no way Tesla's going to go to $400. That's ridiculous. And
Right.
then it was only a couple of months ago, I think Elon himself, when it hit 800, he said, in my opinion, the stock's too high. And here we are at 2,000. So
Yeah, well, but it's also an example of multiple things can be true at the same time. It can be this crazy high and also overpriced, as Elon has said multiple times. And yes, he was trying to get attention at the 420 tweeting and some of the other goofy stuff around that era. I mean, it's not a matter of one thing being true. With Tesla, it's kind of all the things being true at any given moment. But also, I think they're unique in that their investors are voting for the success of the company over any sort of actual pragmatic expectations based on actual returns or anything like that. So,
which reminds us that as human beings, we're not rational actors, we're actually emotional
Exactly. And especially when it comes to cars and believing in the future and certain people that have a sort of cult-like effect and have that personality that can carry that.
Yeah.
And that's also why Tesla will remain unique compared to the other car companies, because none of the others have that kind of personality and have earned it the way that Tesla has over time. So Trevor Milton coming out of the gate and trying to behave like Elon without the track record isn't going the same as Tesla has managed. So Elon gets away, and Tesla gets away with a lot more than other companies would, than other people would. And there are lots of double standards in play in terms of
Huge
decisions that are made.
Huge double
Fabulous.
standards. Yeah.
Yeah.
GM actually has to make and sell cars for their stock to go up.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's really that simple at some levels. You know, Tesla's main product is the stock.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, Michael, before we let you go, where should people find you?
Yes, thank you. Visit us at ZoZoGo.com. Zozo means to get around, to move from here to there in Chinese, Zozo. And then go is just go. So ZoZoGo.com. There you'll find our podcast, Winning in Asia, our newsletter, which is a weekly free ZoZoGo newsletter, and also some fun videos we call Ask Me Anything. In a few minutes, you get a flavor from markets from Thailand to Indonesia. Next week will be Vietnam, which is drawing a lot of interest these days. So check it out, ZoZoGo.com, for all the action.
Awesome.
Highly recommend ZoZoGo.com. Go check it out. Michael, thank you so much. Chelsea, last word?
I thank both of you for hanging out at Treehouse.
All right.
As
We'll see you
always.
soon.
That's it. Until next time, when we open up the Treehouse, we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.